The director of the Albany County Public Library. We're very happy that you're here tonight and that we can host the League of Women Voters Forums. Before we get started, I just wanted to briefly mention the prints that you see hanging around the room tonight. Right now, Laramie and the University of Wyoming are hosting what's called the Mid-America Printmaking Conference. And this exhibit is called Unnecessary Duplicates. And tomorrow afternoon from 3 to 6:30, there is a pop-up art tour at about a dozen locations around town. Not only does the library have these prints, but we have several other sets of prints throughout the building, and they will be here for the next several days. So we'd love to have you look at those tonight or later this week. There is a small table in the back corner by the fire extinguisher that has more information about that if you're interested. So thank you. Nancy?
Well, thank you, Ruth. I'd like to welcome everyone here again tonight. As she said, I'm Nancy Lockwood. Make sure I get this. Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Nancy Lockwood for the League of Women Voters of Laramie, and I'd like to thank Ruth and her staff for helping with the setup and making arrangements and allowing us all to use this nice space tonight. Tonight's forum is for the Wyoming State Senate and House candidates whose districts include parts of Albany County. All candidates all the candidates for these positions were invited to participate. Kathy Connolly informed us she would be unable to attend to a legislative meeting, but she did provide me with a brief statement, which I will read before we begin our questions for the candidates. We have 2 additional forums for local candidates on the next 2 Thursday evenings here at the library. October 11, the Albany County School Board trustee candidates will be present, and on October 18, the Albany County Fire District, Hospital Board of Trustee, and Laramie Rivers Conservation District candidates will be here. In addition, there will be a candidate forum for gubernatorial candidates on Thursday, October 25 from 5:15 to 6:45 at the Arts and Sciences Auditorium on the UW campus. This is being co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Wyoming, Wyoming Public Media, Laramie Boomerang, the UW Political Science Club, and the UW Political Science Department. And I don't have any further information on that. Susan, do you have anything more?
You can send questions to Wyoming Public Media or to info@WyomingLWD if you have something you'd like to ask the candidate.
Did you guys hear that? So if you have questions for that particular forum, you can send those questions via the website, the League of Women State of Wyoming League of Women Voters website, and where else? Wyoming Public Media. So they're taking questions in advance. I'd like to remind everyone that recording of any kind is not allowed. We are video recording the forum ourselves, and that will be posted on the League of Women Voters website in a day or 2 after the forum. And the previous forums that we've had, the last 3 Thursday nights, are now posted up there as well. So if you missed one and want to get in on all the excitement, I invite you for some viewing. On the back table, there are brochures regarding the League, including membership brochures. So if you're enjoying these forums and are interested in current issues and civic responsibility, you might consider joining the League. We can always use more people to help out. In addition, there are free copies of the Wyoming State League publication, A Look at Wyoming Government, that provides information about the Wyoming and the Native people's government here in our state. Candidates also have provided literature and information if they brought that, and that's available on the back table as well. We have a sign-in sheet too on our table, and we'd appreciate your signing in so we have a count of who's here, and that way you can also provide us with contact information if you would like further information about the League. In addition, on the back table, hot off the press, and I'll get to this in just a minute, but I can't wait to hold it up, is our voter guide. This is an advanced copy. Susan's got one back there too. These are now located, there's 2 copies I understand at the front desk here at the library, and we will be placing them at other various civic places around town public, I'm trying to think where else we have them. We use them at the Epson Center, at the county clerk's office certainly, so take a look at that before it gets published in the Boomerang, and I'll give that publication date here in just a minute. So, the general election will be Tuesday, November 6th, with polling places open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Or you may vote early by completing a ballot at the county clerk's office or by requesting an absentee ballot from the county clerk's office beginning September 21 through November 5. Election information can be obtained from the county clerk's website or from the Wyoming Secretary of State's website. If you are not registered to vote or need to change voter information, you may do so at the clerk's office through October 22. You'll need a picture ID to do that. You may also register or change your registration after October 22 through November 5 if you also cast an absentee ballot at the same time. And you can register or change your registration at your polling place on Election Day. So that's a lot of information, and actually Jackie is here, so if you need a reminder after the forum, she can help out, or just go onto the clerk's website or give them a call and they'll give you that information. If you have special needs, voting accommodations and aids are available at each polling place and at the clerk's office. The election judges can assist you, and you can contact the clerk's office to make arrangements in advance for assistance. In addition to voting for elected officials during the general election, a 1% general purposes tax is also on the ballot, as well as a 4% lodging tax. We also have 4 judicial retentions for judges in districts. These are in There are four judicial retentions for judges in districts A and B, and 2 circuit court judges are on the ballot. The League has prepared pro-con flyers regarding the 2 ballot issues, which I think are on the back table. Did we get them here tonight? Okay. And we are also preparing a pro-con flyer on the judicial retentions that we hope to have at our remaining forums. The League does not take a position on either of the taxes or on the judicial retentions. On the table at the side of the room over here are sample ballots for the general election, and on the walls over here are precinct maps. So if you need to know you can look up your location and find your voting precinct, and then you can check your ballot. We do request that you leave the ballots there. We only have 1 copy of each ballot. The League of Women Voters of Laramie and the Daily Boomerang's voter guide that I just gave you the advance notice on will be published by the Boomerang in their October 21 edition of the paper, and this will be a pull-out section. The voter guide is also posted on our website, and as I mentioned, we'll have advance copies around town. At this time, I'd like to give an opportunity for any other candidates here tonight not involved in the state House and Senate race candidates to stand up and briefly introduce themselves. No, thank you.
Start. I'm Erin O'Doherty. I'm running for City Council Ward 3.
So my name is Michael Pierce. I'm running for Albany County Treasurer.
Good evening. I'm Pete Gosar, running for Albany County Commissioner.
I'm Jackie Gonzalez, seeking re-election as your county clerk.
I'm Peggy Trent. I'm the current Albany County prosecuting attorney, and I'm running for a 2nd term.
All right, thank you. And as I mentioned, Kathy Connolly couldn't be here, and I will go ahead and read her statement that she has provided since she couldn't be here tonight. She says, thanks to the League for hosting this and other events throughout the community to encourage bipartisan citizen engagement through voting. Your work makes a difference. I'm Kathleen Connolly, well not, but candidate for re-election in House District 13. I'm sorry that I'm unable to participate in tonight's forum. I'm attending the Joint Labor Health Legislative Meeting in Casper, where the Department of Workforce Services is releasing its report on the disparity of wages between men and women. This comprehensive report is a result of legislation that I sponsored in 2017. The findings show that Wyoming is still among the worst states in the nation for the wage gap, and while the extent of the gap varies, it exists across variables including occupation, educational attainment, and industry. We can and must do better. In Casper, I will introduce ideas for legislative solutions, including attention to how we implement endow, minimum wages, and the need for wage transparency. I've been honored to serve the residents of House District 13 for 10 years. I bring commitment and experience to the job and will continue to do so. In addition to working on issues related to the wage gap, I will sponsor legislation and advocate for high-quality education for our students from pre-K through college, continued state support for the city of Laramie and Albany County, justice for all, including victims of domestic violence, those wrongly convicted, and the LGBTQ community, increased access to health care, and economic development with revenue enhancements to address our needs for infrastructure and community services. Thank you for your continued support, and please do not hesitate to contact me with questions or concerns. So that's from Kathy there. Now I'll turn things over a bit here to the mechanics of tonight's forum. Questions for the candidates can be written down and be submitted at any time, and I know some have already come in as you were waiting. There are pencils and pads and paper in each row of seats. Raise your hand when you have a question, and a league member will collect the question from you and give it to our moderator. Questions should be directed towards all candidates in a race, not towards a particular candidate. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question. We do have a timekeeper who will signal you by holding up a sign indicating the time remaining when you are approaching your time limit and at the conclusion of your time limit. The moderator may edit questions for clarity and appropriateness and may ask further questions to help expand upon an issue. In addition, the moderator may also vary the allowed response time based on the complexity of the question and overall time constraints of the forum. The last 20 or 30 minutes or so will be given over for informal conversation with audience members, and the League would like to thank each candidate who's standing for office. I'll now turn things over to our moderator tonight, Ann Alexander. Ann is an Associate Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education and an economist. Since moving to Wyoming 25 years ago, she's tried to focus her economic policy work on things that matter most to the state. She's also been an AAS Fellow. Sometimes you can tell me what an AAS Fellow is. At the U.S. State Department, and UW's International Programs Director, because one of the things that matters most to Wyoming citizens is being an active participants in the our global economy. So welcome, Ann. And a reminder to candidates too, please speak. Notice every time I move this, it goes away. Please speak directly into the microphone. So, and you can turn it on and off as you pass it down. There's one there, and I'll hand this one. Our moderator can pass it back and forth.
Okay. Well, thanks to everybody that's here in the audience for taking the time out to get to know more about the folks up here that want to serve you in our legislature. To the candidates, thank you for your investment of time and your willingness to serve. And most importantly, I think, let's thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to have this interaction with our candidates. So, AAAS stands for American Association for the Advancement of Science, just so you know.
Not as informed as others.
That's all right. Let's begin this session by asking each of the candidates to introduce yourself by name and party, because these races are partisan. We don't have time for opening and closing remarks per se, but of course all of your material is welcome on the back tables there if you would like to provide information in writing to folks. So let's go ahead. I will hand the microphone to you, and maybe you all on that side from Mr. Pelkey over can share that microphone.
Thank you. Let's see how close I can be
You
here.
have to be like
Just right, there we go. I'm Chris Robbins. I'm a Democratic candidate running for re-election for Senate District number 9.
Good evening. I'm Leanne Stevenson. I'm running for Senate District 11 as a Democrat.
Thank you. Dan Furphy. I'm a Republican and running for House District 14, which is simply Grand Avenue North, 15th Street East, all the way to the top of the county.
Hello, I'm Lorraine Solino Klein, and I'm the Democratic candidate, and I'm the nurse running for House District 14, running against my neighbor, of course.
My name is Charles Pelkey. I'm running for a third term representing House District 45, which is 9th Street westward and includes West Laramie.
Good evening. My name is Roxy Jackson Hansling. First of all, I'd like to thank Ann and the League of Women Voters for putting this forum on, and thank you all for attending. I'm running as a Republican, and I'm running for Wyoming House District 45, and I'll reiterate, it's in West Laramie from 9th Street over. Thank you.
I am Jackie Grimes, and I am running for representative for House District 46. And since they set the precedent of going ahead and describing what that is, I'm going to do my best to describe 46 for you because it's an interesting district. We go about as far east as you can in Albany County, and then we head south to Colorado border, and we wrap up through Centennial. Part of Grand Avenue South is mine, but we hit 15th and we stop and we head backwards. So it's a little bit difficult to follow, but it's a great, huge, beautiful area that I am glad I get to live in. Uh-oh, we've got a chair situation. Here we go.
I'm Bill Haley. I'm a Republican running for House District 46. I'm the incumbent in.
All right, thank you very much for that. Many of the questions I have are intended for all of you. A couple of the questions are for specific races, and I appreciate the questioner for giving me the names of the candidates for that one, so thank you very much. So I'll start off with one. We will alter the order of answer as we go along, so we'll start here and move that way, and then we'll start with you and move that way, and so on down the line. So the first question is, what are your thoughts on how to address the growing mental health issues facing adults and juveniles?
It's an excellent question, and certainly something that we've looked at a lot in the legislature over the years. The need for expanded mental health coverage is significant in the state of Wyoming. A good bit of action was actually taken nearly a decade ago to expand coverage and access, but over the years that I've been in the legislature, that's been eroded. I think that some of the key things that we can do to expand access to mental health care, particularly first and foremost, is the expansion of Medicaid. Medicaid expansion is a way of serving particularly the lower income individuals where there is a lot of mental health concern, need for mental health care, and realistically at this point in time, no affordable access for those individuals. So that would be a reasonable step one, and certainly something that I believe would go a long ways towards it. Another approach that we can take that we've cut back on through the legislature is providing resources and funding to some of our clinics, our mental health care clinics around the state, where people know that they're able to go in, have crisis beds, have access to affordable care services. We've been scaling back through the legislature for cost-saving measures the amount of money that's available. If we restore those programs, restore the funding, we can go a long ways towards that. I suspect we'll have a question on revenue later, which links to that. We've been cutting things as opposed to finding new revenue, and that probably needs to change.
Access to mental health care is quite an issue, particularly in my district, which is extremely rural. It takes 8,000 square miles to make 18,600 people. So in Rock River, McFadden, Arlington, in those areas, mental health care is non-existent. So expansion of Medicaid is the number one issue that I think needs to be accomplished. I think that's what my constituents would like to see. I would also like to see reinstitution of some of the programs that have been eliminated through the prison.
I also represent Rawlins, or hope to represent Rawlins, and there has been significant cuts to both substance abuse and mental health care in the prison system. I think that this is an area of great need, particularly in how rural we are.
Again, Dan Fluffy. What happened in 2016 when we were working on the budget? We cut mental health funding significantly, and that has had a major impact on our state. So last year, we realized that we'd gone too far. And so we restored a lot of that funding. We restored a lot of that funding that we had cut in 2016, knowing that we were hurting the citizens of this state. Now, I am one of the few Republican candidates who's in favor of Medicare expansion. And there's a lot of reasons. I was on the hospital board for 8 years, and I know how important that is to keeping our rural hospitals operating in this state, as well as providing the mental health support that we need. So, stop there.
I'm Lorraine Salino-Klein, and I'm the nurse that's running, and I sure know about mental health issues. I sure know about medical issues. I run a small business. I've been on the community health center board. I've been on the, I'm on a suicide prevention activity for that the Kiwanis is sponsoring in our schools. I'm an educator. I've seen firsthand what happens. We cannot cut our way to success. We must invest in ourselves, and if we don't do that, part of that is Medicaid expansion. We have a new community health center in town, and they are doing a lot of nurse practitioners with mental health, and we need to support those issues, support those programs. We cannot cut our way to the future.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. You know, I don't mean to repeat what's been said before, but I think one of the critical things in this state is Medicaid expansion. We've basically turned down $500 million in federal funds for this state. Those dollars could have gone to hospitals, mental health care, clinics, rural medical services, all of which I believe are linked and inextricably linked. We have another problem with mental health care services is that it puts a strain on, we have one mechanism for short-term hospitalization called Title 25. This county in particular has been making progress in a gatekeeper system, but we don't have the resources to take care of people with severe mental illnesses. So what happens then is that it falls on the criminal justice system. And I'm a defense attorney. I've been involved in the Title 25 process, and I've seen people who really shouldn't be in detention, really shouldn't be in prison. They should be getting mental health care treatment. What we've had a habit of doing in Wyoming is we cut funding, and then you suddenly discover that because we reduce those programs, we spend money in other areas, law enforcement or the like. So, frankly, the biggest step we could take is to expand Medicaid.
Thank you. As my work as a guardian ad litem, where I represent children, I work with families and children day in and day out and weekly, and this is an issue that is very near and dear to my heart. We do have an issue with mental health and juvenile issues here in the state, and I believe we need to get to the core of the problem. We need to figure out why we have seen an increase in these issues. In my opinion, it's increased substance abuse, lack of family structure, as well as the stress of lack of finances to support the family. I do think that we need to open the discussion up again in the legislature about Medicaid expansion. And I also believe that we need to improve policies and spending practices to promote and develop comprehensive health and mental health care programs, not only for children, but for families, for the elderly, and for veterans. Thank you.
This is a question that I'm pretty passionate about answering. I'm a school psychologist, so when you ask me about mental health, I could probably fill the rest of this time talking about mental health. The 2014-15 school year hit this community pretty hard. We had a number of suicides, the result of which was there was a call to arms within our community to address that personally. I was contacted by Bob Leonard, who asked me if I had a wish list, what would it be? And I brought him a very expensive program the school district could not afford on its own called Sources of Strength in order to address the suicide epidemic within our community and build a culture around coming forward with concerns of mental health. I'm in agreement that we need to expand Medicaid in order to address this, but I also believe we need to be embracing mental health in schools model. That model actually allows professionals to bring their services into a school setting for their entire family. That includes students, their parents, their families, and provides things like childcare so that families have the opportunity to address their concerns without the extra burden. I also believe that we need to be working with our insurance providers to address the difference in how they pay out in terms of mental health. Many people can't afford it even with health insurance because a $125 session is still pretty close to a $125 session with insurance. And mental health medications cost substantially more than any other medications that people need to access. And most can't afford it because their mental health breaks down their ability to have well-paying jobs that can pay for those medications.
If you read what I've written on my website, you'll see that I'm a proponent for increasing the budget in...
Bill, would you put your mic a little bit closer?
Increasing the... I've lost my train of thought. Increasing the budget to address the mental health issues, especially suicide. Wyoming's got one of the highest suicide rates in the nation, and we need to do something about that. And we need to pony up the money to do it. As far as Medicaid expansion, if you talk to healthcare professionals, the reimbursement rate is so small that we need to do something to help them because they can't keep their practice open if they take too many Medicaid patients because the reimbursement rate is so low that they can only take a few and keep their practice going. So. I guess we'll have to look and see what this next biennium budget has in it and see if we can increase the mental health and suicide awareness.
Logistics looks, now it's getting working. My giant booming voice is still not
coming. There we go. All right, you have to hold it right there. This mic seems to work the best. So we're going to use that mic for you guys. And I will try there. It's exactly there. Do not move it. Hold on to it right there. Okay. So the next question.
You move.
We will start.
We will start with Ms. Stevenson. Surveys show that young people are not participating in elections or government functions. When elected, what will you do to encourage young Wyoming citizens to engage in civic activity?
That's a very interesting question. I think that, making sure that we use the technology that the younger generation is using, to make sure that they understand the democratic process, the voting, and I think that is beginning to happen. I think even at the county clerk's office, they've become quite engaged with using electronic communication. I would like to see programs in the, discussion in the schools directly about your civic duty. I feel running for office is a civic duty. I owe that to my community to represent them. And to be able to talk about those kinds of things in a school setting, in a civic setting, as it did when I was in school. We used to have our own mock elections and those kinds of things. So trying to use technology to communicate, making sure that it's a two-way communication and that I plan to listen to their needs.
Well, a couple of issues here we need to talk about, getting kids involved. Sarah Reese at the City of Laramie next week has invited the legislators to meet with youth group, and these are high school kids from our community, and we're just going to sit down and have dinner with them and allow them to visit with us, ask questions, and just get to know us a little better. I think that's a great program, and we need to expand that. Now, the other thing that my wife and I did this year, as I was campaigning, we involved the neighborhood kids. We involved them participating in the parade and doing activities, and they loved it, and they got excited about it. So I think we do need not only just the high school kids, but even the younger kids. Get them involved. Let them understand the process. And so it's important for kids to participate at a young age, so they'll hopefully be interested going forward. Thank you.
That's not choke the opponent. That's not nice. Well, I taught in the schools for about 11 years, and I taught nurses' aides and EMTs, and a lot of the focus of that is what to do legally and your responsibility when you work in healthcare. I think that I wish I had the answer to get all kids involved in political action and being good citizens, but I do know from working with students that we're not teaching a lot of civics in school. We're cutting budgets and not allowing for these extracurricular things that students can do to have them participate. And I think that we need to do a little more of that, teach some civics, and I know that teachers work pretty hard in different classes to help students understand their role and responsibilities to be good citizens. And I think we need to stress that all over in our communities. And we see a lot of action that says we're going to try to keep people away from the polls. We can't keep people away from the polls, and we have to teach our kids that it is their responsibility.
Perfect. I have to agree, you know, the numbers are astounding when you look at voter turnout among 18 to 30-year-olds. I think some things are changing. There are a lot of issues that young people are passionate about, environmental issues, public safety, and I've seen an increase in interest among young people. My own daughter, Annika, is the Millennial Get Out the Vote coordinator for an organization here in this community, and she's trying to fan the flames of interest among people in that age group. I agree that we could improve civics education. I think Laramie's blessed with some excellent civics education. I was impressed when I got to the legislature that each year, in each session, Cody High School students come down and they pick a topic of interest, and they encourage a legislator to sponsor a bill, and they'll actually lobby the legislature, and they at least get to see that they have an impact. And I think visiting the legislature, encouraging young people to do so, and try to be as responsive as you can to the issues that they're involved in, because the one thing that I notice is that people feel disheartened, no matter what the age, if they don't feel like they're having an impact. And so you've got to convince people that their votes not only count, but that they matter.
Thank you. I believe that our community can be defined by a volunteer spirit, and those volunteers represent a tremendous resource capable of providing services that neither government nor business can achieve. So I believe that the volunteers, we as adults, should go out into the community to engage our children and educate them on voting and on political issues, as well as the importance of their voice being heard in future elections. Elections have consequences, and we need to educate young people so that they grow up to learn that they need to be heard and they need to have a voice, and that their choices are what dictates the future of their community, as well as their lives and their families. I believe our greatest resource is also education. We need to go out and educate these young people. I know that around the state and here in this community, our district court judges have a program where they bring young people into the courtroom and show them the processes of the legislature as well as the judicial system. So I think we're on the right track. Thank you.
I think engaging with our youth is a top priority for a number of reasons. One, when you turn 18 and you suddenly have this civic responsibility, it feels like this heavy thing that you're not quite capable of making that decision yet, and it feels uncomfortable. It also doesn't seem like something that's supported when you're 18. I've lived in other states where you actually register to vote where you get your driver's license. So when a teen goes and gets their driver's license, the next question is, do you want to register to vote? And it's one less stop and one less barrier to accessing the ability to go out and vote. I also think it's really important for us to demonstrate how important their civic responsibility and duties are. That's an investment that we make as a community, and we can do things with that either via scholarship, where we reward kids for participation in civic duty, or we make sure we're doing a better job of targeting who we include in these experiences. The kids who get to participate in all these wonderful activities are typically our high-achieving student government kids who are hand-selected, best-behaved kids, and they're going to vote anyway. They've got active and engaged parents. We don't do anything with our at-risk kids, and we don't do anything with our average kids, and they just kind of pass through the system. We have to be more equal in who it is we're reaching out to and who we're involving. A big priority of my run for office actually has been including the youth in my campaign, having them coming knocking on doors. That happens fast.
I think that would be a good topic for the newly created Engage part of it now, and I would assume this group knows all about that. And so that's the demographic that you're asking about, and we should. Another area would be civics classes in high school, and then these kids are always using cutting-edge communication devices. We need to program them. However you do it, I'm too old to do it, but there's new devices being invented every day, and we need to incorporate that to engage them into the process.
Let's see if I can use this one. Seems like it's working right now. There's a lot we can do as elected officials, and over the 8 years that I've been in the legislature, I've spoken to countless youth from K through 12 in college, and tried to engage them because of the importance that we've just heard from the other panelists. The reality is the voter turnout for ages 18 through 29 is pathetic. It's in the last midterm in 2014, it was around 20% compared with around 60% for those 60 and older. So a 3-to-1 difference. And I think one of the keys is to let them understand that those votes that they cast, that's their representation. That's what they have as their voice in the elections, and it's critical that they provide their views, and then they get out and vote on behalf of their views. So we have opportunities to participate, and over the last 8 years, Boys and Girls State is a great way to bring our youth into the civics education, and I've supported that certainly over the years. But there's a lot more that we can do. We do well from the prescriptive side of education, but our ability to get out into the classrooms directly, to offer ideas and advice, to speak to students, tell them about the importance of voting, that's something that we have the opportunity to do, and I've certainly taken advantage of that and will continue to do so. It's a critical role that we serve.
All right. Next question, we are going to start with Mr. Furphy this time. And this is a complicated question, but maybe not. I'm sure you all have an answer for it. So, it has been reported that Wyoming's rainy day fund is roughly 300 days of expenses, second only to Alaska at roughly 350 days of expenses. No other state is in triple digits. So, part one, what is the appropriate size of the rainy day fund? Part two, when is it appropriate to use the rainy day fund? And part three, what items is it appropriate to use the rainy day fund for?
And I'm happy to repeat any of
that as needed.
Thank you. Well, this has been one of my major concerns this past budget session. We had about $1 billion shortfall in meeting required expenditures. So how did we fund that? We funded that about $300 million from existing cash that will not be there again. So we used up the cash reserves that we had. We diverted future revenues that should be set aside for future generations. We diverted almost $300 million. So we took 1% severance tax that was to go into reserves, we spent it. Then the final amount, we spent $400 million out of our reserves. That's the rainy day funds and school reserves. So I'm saying of the $1 billion we had to cover, we used what should be one-time money. We can't keep spending down our reserves. We should have reserves that could support the state for one biennium. So we need approximately $1 billion in reserves set aside. So we need to replenish the LISRA, as it's called, the rainy day fund. So.
Okay. Well, I think I've been to a lot of doors, and I think people think it's boring. And I think they want to use some of that funds, but also we can't say that we want to use funds that are in reserve, but we'll never make any money or change anything in our tax structure to be able to have the revenues to support our state. I think if we're not willing to invest in ourselves, who is going to invest in Wyoming? We need to be upfront about what we have and how we utilize it, and we need to be making sure that we have some reserve, but that we spend on ourselves. And maybe that means generating more revenue, because it's not going to fall out of the sky.
Yeah, the revenue doesn't fall out of the sky. We actually dig it out of the ground here. You know, I agree with Representative Furphy that we need to ensure that we have adequate reserves for a biennium. I think the essential items that we need to use reserves on are those things: healthcare, education, and public safety. I think those are the critical things that the state has to address. It's the responsibility of government to provide. The other thing that I think is critical, in addition to a look at our revenue system, is we have to get more transparency in our budgets in this state. One of the things that surprised me in my first term was, we had a $30 million expenditure, and I asked, well, where's the money going to come from? And they go, oh, it's going to come out of this coffee can over here. Well, we got a lot of coffee cans. We have a national organization that does not assess Wyoming's budget because we're not transparent enough. It's a complicated system, and I'd be amazed if the legislature itself has a full grasp of what our actual financial picture is in this state.
Thank you. I would agree that our budget is quite complex, and the distribution of our revenues is also quite complex, and that we need a better transparency on how that budget is developed and how the expenditures are divvied out into the 23 counties. I think we need to do a better job on matching revenues and expenditures, always keeping in mind that the next bus may just be around the corner. I think that politicians, and in all due respect, but I think they're eager to please and are so tempted to overspend during the good times, especially when the bills usually come due after they're long gone. We need legislatures who can make hard-headed decisions based on reality with our eye to the future. The question on when to use our rainy day fund, I believe that the legislature and the governor has been working on this for the past 4 years, and it's the Endow program, and I know that they have quite a program in place, and they're looking on how to fund that, and possibly, taking some of that rainy day funding out to help with that. Thank you.
It seems like we've got several parts here that I'm not quite sure we've fully hit. The first part being what size, the kind of size that we need, with us having about 300 days of expenses that we could fully cover. That part feels slightly off to me, just in terms of, I don't think we're at the place where we're going to spend 300 days straight. I do think we have to look at using those funds to supplement when we're in a bust cycle. We have to be able to ensure certain services are continuing to be in place, like education, healthcare, and public safety. That's kind of a critical component. But what we also need to do is start looking at opportunity during times that are good. So if we look at other neighboring states like Idaho, when they're in their boom cycle, they use that time to bring in other revenues producers into their state, so they wouldn't have another bust cycle. So when their coal, mineral, and oil busted for a while, they had other systems in place to supplement that. And so we need to be more strategic of how we're identifying these cycles and using them to our advantage, so that we're not having to constantly stress about this boom and bust situation.
We have two very large budgets. The education budget's $1.8 billion, and the healthcare budget's $1.8 billion. And we have a $900 million structural deficit. If we could spend that rainy day account in 1 year, and thank goodness the people that preceded us started a rainy day account, so we can use it now in critical situations. I think one of the biggest things that we can do is to continue the efficiency studies that the legislature started. That saved the taxpayers millions of dollars. And so, to answer the one question, where could we use it? Last year we took $40 million out of the LISRA to fund different endow bills that we passed. If we're going to diversify the economy, we're going to have to spend some money on those projects.
The first thing that I think is important to clarify is that we have been spending out of the rainy day fund, the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, for the past 3 years. So that's not something that has really been communicated very well, but we started that about 3 years ago. We had reached nearly $2 billion value for the LISRA. Right now it's around $1.6 billion, so we've already spent it down around $300 million, and as was pointed out, this next budget, the biennial budget, is projected to spend around $388 additional million out of that Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, leaving around 1.2. That's under great market conditions. You have to realize that we've gotten to a point now where we're banking on capital gains off of the stock market to cover our budget. That's what we're expecting. We're not just expecting it, we're counting on it. We budgeted capital gains from the stock market to cover any shortfalls that we're seeing in the future. And when you do that, then that $400-ish million, the 388, can rapidly grow if the stock market tanks up to around 800 million. So we're already spending it. The reality is we have cut about as deeply as you can possibly cut. If you don't think the leaders of the majority party in the legislature have done a thorough job of overcutting programs, then you haven't been paying enough attention. What we need to do at this point is to grow revenue and recognize that we're cutting into critical programs. We need to make sure that education, healthcare, cities, towns, and counties are not further cut.
I think most of my feelings have already been addressed as well. Transparency is number one. I think the budgeting for everyone, not just the legislators, is very difficult to understand and very difficult to explain when you try to explain to constituents about the budget that we have and the coffee cans referred to and all of those kinds of things. It's very complicated. We need to uncomplicate that. I also feel that some of the spending, I would agree with, that some of the projects in the endow, some of the things that will help build a more stable economy so that we can get out of the boom-bust type situation that we're in and flatten it out a little bit. One of the things that was in endow that really intrigued me was investment in business and making business capital investments in the state of Wyoming. And I think that is just amazing. I didn't know that we weren't investing in our own businesses. So, you know, for sure, we want the businesses that are here to succeed. And so that's one of the areas that I would advocate spending.
All right, the next two questions are for particular races. So in the first question, Ms. Klein, Mr. Furphy, this one is for you. And Ms. Klein, if you would be so kind as to go first.
So the
question is, how does your experience prepare you
for this position?
Well, thank you. As you just heard, our state budget is complicated. And we need to look at diverting some of our revenues carefully, and we need to diversify our economy. But I'll talk on that hopefully at some point. That's another tricky issue. But basically my background, I was CEO of a multi-state banking organization, and so I dealt with difficult budgets in the banking industry. So that does help me in my current position with the state. I'm on 3 committees. I'm on corporations and public subdivisions. I'm on revenue committee, looking at revenue sources. And I'm on capital and investments, looking at how we manage the state's investment portfolio to get the maximized returns. So my background in all of those areas helps me to do that. And I've already met with the current Speaker of the House, Steve Harshman, working on a plan for cutting the deficit going forward. And so we're already working on a plan to resolve that. Thank you.
Well, the major issue that I've heard knocking on doors is that healthcare is important. I happen to be a small business owner for 18 years with healthcare, and I also helped run a business in Rollins, a medical business in Rollins. My experience in medicine is pretty long. I think that what makes me qualified is that I am very open to listening to everyone. I don't have every answer, but I can promise you that I will listen to everyone and get the best decision for everyone. Also, I was the fiduciary for 13 years for the Wyoming State Retirement System, so I'm pretty comfortable with working with budgets and working with investments, and I have that experience, and I did that for 13 years. And I wish I could say diversifying our economy was a simple thing, but we know from Endow and from their experts that we do not have the infrastructure in this state to make sure that we can expand business. So if we want to have diversification, we again need to invest in ourselves. And they're saying we need to look at our tax structure, have some transparency, and figure out how to do it. And I'm willing to work with anyone to make sure that that happens. Good ideas come from both sides and everyone. And I'm open to that. I don't have any set plan that I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to raise this and I'm not going to be involved. I'm very open to finding solutions that work for people.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is a similar one for the House District 45 candidates, Ms. Hensley, Mr. Pelkey. How does your approach to government differ, and what makes you a qualified candidate?
Did I start first? I'm sorry.
First and foremost, I believe that the government's role is to provide infrastructure, to provide safety and for its citizens, and that they need to be responsive to the electorate. I believe that they need to step back and allow the citizens of the community to engage in their businesses, to allow them to make decisions for their businesses, for their families. I believe that, I kind of lost thought, sorry about that. I believe they need to work hand in hand with the residents for a fair and justice outcome, and their basic services should be fire protection, like I said, water, sewers, roads, and that they should be able to budget and provide all these services at a reasonable cost, and to be responsible to the citizens of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. My approach to government has always been that, I don't like the fact that people often look at government as a separate entity. We're the government. We're a community. Government represents a community working together. Government represents the fact that we as a community have come together to take care of expenses that we can't do individually. Fire protection is the obvious, healthcare, education, roads. Those things we collectively decided that we want to do together. I agree that regulatory government should step back when it's unnecessary. And I think one of my favorite examples of that was a bill proposed and passed by my friend Tyler Lindholm from Crook County, and that's the Wyoming Food Freedom Act. And it allows people to, ranchers to directly sell to consumers without undue government interference. When regulation is in place, it should be done to make sure that negative behaviors, externalities of your business, for example, if you're spewing toxic waste out, somebody ought to tell you that you probably shouldn't be doing that. As far as my qualifications, I've had a variety of jobs over my life, all the way from the janitor at Ivinson Memorial Hospital and surgical department. I've been a journalist for 25 years, and then in my late 40s, I became an attorney. So I've got a lot of experience and run across a lot of different people in my life.
All right, thank you very much. The next question is for all of you, and we'll start with Ms. Grimes. So here is the next question. What are your thoughts on the distribution of state funding to local governments?
I feel like this is probably an issue that's really impacting local government right now, with having to set budgets before they know what the state's going to kick in and contribute, and then having to go and play fix it later or make different choices later. Where this really needs to be done better is we need to have local control more of a prominent player. With a bus cycle that kind of keeps on giving, there's less and less available for local communities, and there's a lot of needs. Certain communities that don't have the benefit of the coal, oil, and mineral industry supporting them, we suffer more. Like in Albany County, it's harder for us. We've got less money, we're a poor county. We've got a lot of needs in our county because we have the university here, and that brings an influx of population with that. And there's a lot of needs that need to go along with that. Some of those big concerns, if we're not doing an adequate job of supporting our local governments and our local communities, is that there are cuts to our police department and our fire department and our ability to maintain services for our communities. And that needs to be a priority. I think at this juncture, what has already been reiterated numerous times is that transparency piece, so that when we say there's not money, people need to be able to see why and understand what's going to happen next. And there's a lot of distrust because people don't know where these responses are coming from.
In this next legislature, we're going to be looking at the tax structure of Wyoming. And one of the conversations is going to be to allow this city and counties to tax the taxpayers that are there. We may cut out the $105 million that's currently been made available to these different municipalities or governments. And one of the issues is if we allow the different government entities to tax people, places like Gillette and Rock Springs are going to generate a lot more tax dollars than Albany County. So what do? I think that we ought to make that, if we're going to allow it, that we distribute that money based on the population and by the citizen, rather than the county that it's generated in, because it's going to help other larger counties a lot more than it will help Albany County.
So this is a significant issue, and the reality is this: our system for local revenue distribution is is absurd at this point in time, and it is all the Wyoming legislature's fault. It really is. The reality is that for decades, we have wanted to micromanage all of the fund distributions out to the communities. So we have representatives of the 99 municipalities and the 23 counties all coming together fighting for the funds, when the reality is, if we would just take our hands off of it and let the localities, let the counties, and let the cities have more control over their local taxation, understanding what their local tax base is, what's appropriate for their community. I mean, we recognize here that a beer tax would probably be a handy thing. It's one of the things we consume in Laramie. It might not be for everybody, but we would probably pass that here. Those types of local decisions are rational for the community to decide, not for the legislators to put a one-size-fits-all solution down upon the local areas. There's a lot that we can do. The suggestion we just heard of a direct distribution based on population instead of based on where you dug up the minerals, those kinds of things, that's something that is considered, particularly for sales tax, to be the gold standard around the country. That's how other states do it. The fact that we don't do it is based largely on some counties are very much opposed to that because they get all the revenue right now. You can imagine they don't want to give it up. But there's a lot better that we can do. We need to make sure that we're providing sufficient resources to cities, towns, and counties, and that's up to the legislature to make those decisions, and we haven't done it yet.
I guess in the very rural district that I'm in, 15 different municipalities. I live in Riverside, a population of 52, and I'm married to the mayor. So the uncertainty of the funds is quite an issue that's discussed at town councils across my district. It's very difficult, as you can say, to budget. There is a basic standard that needs to be available for all communities. It is not cheap to deliver services in a town of 52. We still have to have sewer, we still have to have water, we still have to have an infrastructure, and having a local taxation wouldn't be a big benefit for the small communities. And so some sort of stabilization of the way that our small communities is funded really needs to happen through the legislature. Although I understand the idea about local taxation, but I don't think that works in the very small rural communities.
Yes, this has been a hot issue for a revenue committee. I'm a big proponent on allowing the cities to be able to tax themselves. If the citizens want to tax themselves, they ought to have the ability to do that. Right now you cannot, under state law, do that. So that makes no sense to me. But the issue is we can't get away at the state level from funding the cities and counties. As I said, $105 million biennium we supply to the cities and counties. If we got away from that, the small communities wouldn't survive without state funding. So we're looking at a combination of ways of allowing the bigger cities, and Laramie's one of those, to be able to tax themselves and yet still support the smaller communities at the state level and not necessarily take away the current funding that we provide to our city and county here. So it is a complicated issue, but I think it can be worked out, and I've been a real proponent of allowing cities to tax themselves if they want to.
Well, can I second some of the stuff the good senator said over there in the corner? Because I think we need to not be micromanaged. We do have to have some control. It was quite interesting when in the newspaper they said the city manager the mayor wanted to fire the lobbyists because the legislature voted to not let cities tax themselves. So she was going to fire the lobbyists, and I suggested maybe you elect a different person to next time you do it. It isn't the lobbyist that makes the laws. So if we're in there in the legislature, it's very important that we support our cities and our towns and our counties. And so we need some of that revenue, but we also need to equally distribute. I mean, the coal that belongs in Gillette belongs to really Wyoming, and so maybe we should all benefit from some of those resources. That's how we get our schools, that's how we get our police, that's how we get our education. This is what we need to do. But we need to be able to have local control too. We don't need to be micromanaged by the state. We're getting good at this passing, you notice? Very good. We're very good at it.
Yeah, and I think the majority of us agree that one of the big steps that the legislature can do is allow communities to determine their own fate. I find it ironic in a state that complains about big government now and advocates local control, leaves it to the state legislature, leaves it to the state to micromanage the decisions for the communities around the state. These communities have different needs, they have different resources, and frankly, if the people of one community want to tax themselves to accomplish something, for example, the additional tax that we levied upon ourselves to enhance the high school that we just built. That's something we're all proud of, we're all happy to be contributing to it. As far as the distribution to towns and counties, again, I have to agree with Senator Rothfuss. The system that we're using right now is unfair, it's ineffective, and worst of all, it's unpredictable. We don't have any stability from year to year. A $200,000 cut can impact a community. It devastates services in a community and result in layoffs, reduction in services, and impact throughout. So I'd like to see greater stability and equitable distribution of state resources. Coal in Campbell County belongs to Wyoming just as much as the education that we provide here in Albany County serves the entire state.
Thank you. I want to go back to the question before. I just want to let you know that what I bring as my qualifications for this position. I have 25 years experience as a successful business owner in Laramie and around the state. And so I understand how government can help or impede businesses of any size. I'm also a practicing attorney and a child advocate for the state of Wyoming. And I have a thorough knowledge of the law and understanding of what needs to be done for our communities and our families. I wear many hats in the community. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a business owner, I'm an attorney, and I believe that working with all the different levels of society that I can bring a better perspective to this position. As far as taxing, again, taxing is very complex from the state. We have all different kinds of revenues coming in, whether it be the PILT, whether it be property taxes, sales and use tax, fuel revenue taxes, so it goes into one pool, and the state legislature has this complex a way of distributing that to the 23 counties. And I think we can find a better way to do that, a simpler way, and that goes to how we do our budget as well. I also agree that local decisions for taxing is up to the local community. Thank you.
All right, this next question, we'll start with Mr. Healy. So you get to go first this time. There are several questions here that I'm going to mash together because they're all important. And they're around potential changes to our tax structure, support for economic development programs. So tell us what your stance is on these. Really? Okay. I will. You can hear me fine because I'm yelling in that direction.
So there are several questions around potential changes to our tax structure, support for economic development programs, and so forth. So tell us what your stance is on these. And if you're feeling very fancy, weave in something about how endow, what about endow's potential in all of this?
I can't hear you. You
come down. My father's in the Marines and he has very bad hearing because of all So there are several questions over there that we've received from the audience surrounding potential changes in the tax structure and support for economic development programs. So tell us what your stance on these might be, and if you're feeling like it, please weave in anything you'd like to about endow's potential.
I'm yelling at you.
Well, again, we'll be looking at that, at all the tax structure in Wyoming this biennium. And as far as endow, we passed 6 bills last session. I voted for every one of them. We've been told to quit kicking the can down the road. And so my feeling is endow is a 20-year vision of how we can quit kicking that can down the road. And if we're not going to support it financially, then I'm not sure what the other step is going to be. We spent $40 million out of the LISRA in order to fund this. And that included air service, which will affect Laramie, besides the other towns that have air service. So if my feeling is we need to support this and see where it goes. And now's a good start, and it may end up diverging to some other area than from where it started. But at least with Governor Mead's vision, we have a place to start.
I've been a proponent for endow and economic development in Wyoming since I've been in the legislature, and was involved in some of the early work, working along with Governor Mead and some of the other leadership on putting together concepts and ideas and really building endow, and then as a member of the Management Council working to shepherd it through the legislature during this last session. So it's something that I strongly support. That said, one of the other points that I've been making for the last few years, and that I'll spend the rest of my time making, is that diversifying the economy in Wyoming is not sufficient. We can do that, and what it would end up doing is bankrupting the state. We don't tax anything other than coal, oil, and gas at a level that is sufficient to fund the workers for any other industry. The Revenue Committee just received an independent report that indicates that. So they did analysis of the long-term economic impacts of a series of different industries in the state of Wyoming, and they found that by adding jobs in manufacturing, for example, it would cost the state additional revenue, because manufacturing does not pay the bills in the state of Wyoming. So when we say we're going to look at taxes over the next couple of years, we need to do a lot more than that. We need to not just look at taxes, we need to change the entire revenue structure of the state of Wyoming in a manner that has equitable revenue opportunities regardless of the industrial sector that we expand into and diversify the economy towards. But without doing that, there's no hope to end the boom and bust cycle.
I too am in favor of many of the topics of endow and would like to work forward with that program, particularly the expansion of fiber optics and internet capabilities across the state. I still think that a lot of times you don't realize that the internet availability in Medicine Bow and Hannah and Encampment and some of those places is not quite the same level as it in the other parts of Wyoming. So in order to help diversify our economy, there's some people that would like to e-commute, for instance, so I would like to move that direction. I'd also like to look, when we look at tax structure, I would like to look at The exemptions that we give, and are they still valid? Are these good exemptions? And let's also support and make sure that we are collecting all the taxes that are owed. And we need to really look hard at those things as well before we start looking at expanding taxes. But I think that there are exemptions that may not be fruitful any longer.
As many of you in this room know, I was involved in economic development in this community for 3 years through LCBA. We were able to attract many high-paying jobs in this community, including underwriters labs, high-vis, tungsten heavy powder and parts, and others. So how did we do that? We utilized the Wyoming Business Council to assist us. So I'm in favor of Endow, but what Endow does is it looks out into the future, as Representative Haley pointed out. It looks out into the future 20 years. It doesn't solve our current situation. So I've been making it clear as we're working on the budget, I'm in favor of funding Endow, but don't take the money from Wyoming Business Council to fund Endow. We need to continue to support Wyoming Business Council for economic development. Now, with respect to taxes on Revenue Committee, we're looking at trying to tax those corporations who come into our state, take our money, and then leave the state, bring in their own jobs, etc., leave the state. We get nothing from them, although we're funding the construction projects, etc. So we need to look at a tax structure to try to get to those corporations.
Well, again, I have to agree with the senator, but we, according to Endow, we need to hire some professional people to help us really recreate our tax structure. We do not tax manufacturing, we do not tax services, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a tax and spend Democrat, but I'm going to say if we don't look at the system and we want to diversify our economy and bring other businesses in here, we have to look at what kind of infrastructure we need to support that, and right now we can't. If the citizens of Wyoming want to tax something, then I'm going to look at that carefully. I'm not going to pledge never to do anything. I'm going to use research, and I'm going to use professional expertise to make decisions. We can't keep doing what we've always done because it's not working. And I do not want to put any kind of burden on hardworking people. Right now, our small businesses, the existing businesses, are creating jobs, paying taxes, and really have a heavy burden. And we need to straighten that out. And I also want to say the other thing with the Endow is that it is very heavily weighted in extraction industries. And we know that that doesn't do anything for the wage gap for women. And we have a huge wage gap, and we need to bring in businesses that support equal pay for equal work. The handoff is getting better every time.
It's much better. You know, it's important that the state be involved in economic development. And some of the projects that we approved last year improved statewide air service. You know, we're attracting new businesses in this state right now by a series of bills that we passed on blockchain technology. In fact, Wyoming has some of the most progressive laws in that area. But again, as Senator Roth has stated, we could bring in thousands and thousands of people into this state, creating tens of thousands of jobs. And if we don't have an alteration in our tax structure, it's going to cost the state money. You bring 1,000 people into this community, you have to educate their kids, you have to provide services, and healthcare. And if you're not able to increase revenues, if you're looking at the same revenue picture as you did before these people arrived, we're going to be in a bad situation. So again, we need to alter our tax structure in this state, and we need to seriously look at it. One of the things that I am proud of, the Albany County delegation, Democrat and Republican alike, none of us signed that silly no new taxes pledge where we would have bound ourselves going into the legislature and not have the flexibility to re-examine our revenues picture in the state.
Thank you. In general, Endow aligns with my ideas for economic development, especially when it comes to infrastructure, the healthcare, and energy initiatives. I think it's critical that Wyoming continue to broaden and diversify its economy in pursuit of economic growth for our future, for job creation for our children, and a quality standard of life. I'm encouraged to hear that the committee is addressing issues on how to strengthen the access to capital, to improve government policy and develop a more effective and active state marketing program. But I believe in order to be effective, these types of programs, the Endow program, must be well designed with a focus on transparency and accountability. And that goes with taxing as well. I would agree that, you know, taxing isn't, in the Endow program, isn't a fix-all to the situation that we're in. But I do agree that we need to really focus on our tax structure to see how we can come up with additional revenues for our community, because, you know, paying taxes is a, thank you.
When we start to look at how we can support our state and our state moving forward, we have to consider a number of things. But probably the first thing that we actually have to consider is our belief system around the idea that there's going to be one plan, one system that's going to have all the answers. There's not going to be a single plan that's going to address all the concerns. We're going to have to bring multiple pieces together to find the solution to what we're facing. We've been very lucky here in the fact that coal, minerals, and oils have given us a free ride. We need to do more to pull our own selves up by our bootstraps and contribute to our own benefit. We've been living a little bit paycheck to paycheck, so I love the prospect of Endow and that 20-year plan to hold us accountable and have a vision. But I also think we need to be looking at things that we can do right now. For instance, we need to be investing in our number 2 and number 3 industries. We have to look at tourism. There's not a season in Wyoming that isn't beautiful that someone can benefit from. We also have to look at our agriculture and the fact that this blockchain technology is really important, but we can also do more to export our goods to other countries as well, and we don't have the facilities to allow that. And instead, people have to bring their animals to other states, and those states benefit from our hard work. We need to do more to keep Wyoming money in Wyoming and benefiting Wyoming people.
So we have time for one more question, and there are many excellent ones to pick, but I'm going to pick this one.
The most excellent of them.
So this is the last one, and it is an interesting one. So I am interested to hear how you respond. In Wyoming, we pride ourselves on our camaraderie and ability to work together. See how they're passing that mic over each other's shoulders. That's pretty impressive. So nationally, though, unity does not seem possible now. What can others learn from Wyoming in politics, and what can we do to promote civility in civic discourse?
Am I start?
You're starting? Yes. Go back to you.
This is a wonderful question to end on, because Wyoming still does a lot of things right. I disagree with my colleagues across the aisle, particularly as the minority leader of the Senate, a lot of the time. And it's my responsibility to disagree and stand up and be that loyal opposition and make sure that alternative voices are heard. But when I'm on the floor and I'm giving those speeches, I'm not arguing with an individual. I'm not attacking other senators. I'm focused on issues. And we take that very seriously in the Wyoming Senate and the Wyoming Legislature. When you're on the attack, you're attacking policy ideas because you're trying to hone policy for the benefit of the people of Wyoming. Everyone in the Senate is doing the same thing. We're on the same team. We're trying to do what's right for the state of Wyoming, and I truly believe that every legislator in the Wyoming Legislature has that in mind when they show up at the legislature, and that's a special thing. So as far as what the rest of the country can learn, they can look to that attitude and that approach. The fact that once I'm done passionately arguing against one of my colleagues and we go for lunch break, we end up in the lunchroom of the Senate, we sit down across from each other over a sandwich and we joke with each other. We build that relationship and we make sure that we're shepherding that relationship, particularly in the hard times. So I would like the federal government to spend some time looking at how Wyoming does things, coming to our legislature, and seeing that you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Exactly what I was going to say. I have had a lot of experience in my previous career on bringing different groups of people together with differing directions and to work to a common outcome. I also feel very strongly that we can have disagreements on policy, but we are both people, and we are both all passionate people, or we wouldn't be where we're at. This isn't an easy road to take, to go to the legislature and to stand up and to take some of those ideas forward for your constituents. So we all have passion. It works well when you can reduce to common goals and then build up from there. That's one of the techniques that I've learned, is that we both have children. We both want children to be educated and then start to talk about how we do that. So I just think that it's really important to work together. I think it's really important to treat people civilly and not with anger and outbursts. And I'm coming into the legislature, if I'm elected, without a set huge direction and a banner that I have to take forward. I want to listen to the people that I serve, and I want to work together for Wyoming.
Well, of course, this past session was my first term, and so I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is the Democrats in the House were pretty conservative, and we had a lot of fairly moderate Republicans. So we honestly got along very well. This group here, we had to work on the university budget, okay? Trying to fight against further cuts to the university budget. So what did we do? We put our heads together and we came up with a plan. We go, you present this concept, and if that doesn't work, then you present the next one. And so we worked together really well, and guess what? We didn't have further cuts to the university budget. So I'm just saying that is good. We work together really well and we accomplish a lot. Now I will say, the conflict I found that surprised me was the conflict between the House and the Senate. We had to go 4 extra days this year because we couldn't come to an agreement. That's not political party conflict. That was just philosophical differences between the two houses. So, thanks.
And it was the Senate's fault.
It was the Senate's fault.
Well, as a registered nurse, I would like to tell you that you cannot get a patient to comply unless you are willing to listen. And as a teacher, you cannot get a student to learn unless you have respect. And I think the same thing applies in the legislature. I think the same thing applies in our communities and our cities. We need to respect everyone's humanity, and it doesn't matter if I disagree with you or I vehemently hate your idea. I must listen and be respectful and try to come out with a common goal, because we all have very similar goals. And I'd like to say I'm running against my neighbor, social acquaintance forever, and if we don't have mutual respect for each other, then this system doesn't really work. And I want to see the system work, and I want to respect people and listen and learn and hopefully teach as well.
So when I got elected to the legislature 4 years ago, one of the traditions that I observed in my first day was they do the morning prayer, they do the Pledge of Allegiance. My Democratic colleague, Stan Blake, as soon as the pledge is over, screams out, "Play ball!" And then we spend the next 10, 15 minutes walking around shaking each other's hands, greeting everybody face to face in the morning. And I thought, that's kind of trite, but I tell you, after 4 years, it's effective. You know, you go in there and you see someone, you shake their hand, you look them in the eye, and they're a human being. You know, they're not some cartoon character that you see, you know, in political memes and stuff. They're actually human beings. You know, I'm one of the most conservative members of the House a few years ago, ran out of the building during the session because his wife was having a baby, and we were all happy and cheering for it. You know, I mean, he and I disagree on virtually everything, but you know, we do share the one thing that, you know, we have. We love kids, and you know, I remember a few years ago another very conservative member called one of the bills that I supported an example of creeping socialism. So the next morning I walked up to him and said in Russian, "Good morning, comrade, how are you?" "Здравствуйте, товарищ, как вы поживаете?" And from that point forward, we called each other comrade. And it's been friendly and respectful, and I don't see any real vitriol in the Wyoming legislature.
I think what other people can learn from our state and the people of our state is how we work together for the benefit of the whole. You know, this is a small state. Everybody knows everybody, and people are related to people that they don't know, so that they don't know they're related to, so we're very respectful of how we speak to others about other people. We have a common goal. We're fiercely independent people, I believe. My husband always told me that when he first met me, and because we're in this together. We've from children, we were raised to be respectful. You know, growing up in the rural areas, on ranches, and small communities, we were taught by our parents to be respectful. We were taught by the school system to be respectful, and I think that shows in the legislature, and it also shows in our communities. I haven't had the opportunity to work in the legislature, but I can tell you, it's also that way in the legal realm. I know that us attorneys go into the courtroom and we fight hard for our clients. And then afterward, and there's some things that are said in that courtroom, but when we walk out of that courtroom, we are respectful and we're friends again. Thank you.
I think what makes Wyoming unique is actually in our identity. The first identity we all have is that we're Wyomingites. Everyone sitting at this table who's already elected, they're not known initially as a politician, they're known as your neighbor. Their identity isn't consumed by this belief that power comes with a title. They go into legislature, they act on the benefit of the people, they go home and they work for other jobs because it's not a full-time job. And so I think that changes the dynamic, because you're not this powerful entity that's unreachable. You're human. I believe we all fundamentally have more in common than we do different. And I think we recognize that. We all know that if we're going from Laramie to all the way out to Jackson Hole, some of us are going to ride a horse, someone might ride a bike, others might carpool, someone might try and take a plane, but we all have the same final destination in mind, and we respect the method in which we get there. We value each other's opinion, and we need each other for checks and balances. We need to think about a concept or an ideal or a bill in its holistic entity. We want those differences of opinion so we can make sure we're representing everybody. And I think we always recognize the person and our neighbor first, and that's the part that matters most.
I guess I always, since I started over there in the legislature, somebody told me about the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is you agree with 80% of what your opponent and you talk about. And 20% you have to work on later. And so that seems to work pretty well. I've collaborated with a couple of Democrats on bills, and it worked fine. Dan and I don't vote exactly the same on every bill. But like you said, when UW needed some help, we all got together. And so you may argue on one bill, and the next bill you're voting exactly the same. So that's what the national people can take away from watching the Wyoming legislature.
Well, thank you so much to all of you in the audience. I'm trying to find the right spot.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you to all of you in the audience for all of your great questions. There are several other great questions that go unanswered this evening because our time is about up. So thank you so much for coming and asking those great questions. Thank you too to the candidates. They have all been incredibly good sports, all given thoughtful and civil responses. We all know that this is very hard work, what you're doing right now. So with that, I'm going to turn maybe this mic over to Nancy for some final wrap-up logistics and comments.
That's a better
Throw that one away.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm relieved to know it wasn't just me who doesn't know how to use a microphone. Last couple things are, we're going to let you break up and chat with each other, and to facilitate that, it's helpful to not have all these chairs sitting out here. So to help us with picking up the chairs, we would like you to stack them in the back closet. There are chair stackers, little cart things for them. You stack 20 per chair, 20 per cart. We're going to leave out the chairs that are up front here, and probably about the first row of chairs here. Is that right, Ruth? Got you here. And those will go back in a semicircle facing this wall here when we're done. And some of the tables get taken down as well. These tables stay up. And the tables need to go back. This is logistics here, back into the closet first. It's much easier that way, let me tell you. I've tried it the other way. I don't think I have anything else to say. I'm glad you all came tonight. We hope to see you out here for the next two.